So back when I was younger, my caregivers would be called in school and they would be like, your daughter is having these deals with boys. And they would be like, well, what's the deal? Well, you tell them. And I would be like, well, the deal is if I get to kick them in the nuts, then they get to do my homework.
All right. So I think this is episode number 10 now of Up at Night with John. And for you, it will actually be up at night. And because it's midnight, right? It's which I really am jealous of you for that, because I miss doing podcasts at night. They were so fun to do at night. I have with me Soviet Mercedes, who, if I had to create a category, it would be a challenge. So I don't think there is a category for you as what you do, right? You are a dominatrix and a cultist.
Yes.
And if I had to say myself, a brilliant marketeer, I guess you could say. So on all three of these things, it's a very unique, interesting combination, which is why I had to talk to you in the first place. So thank you for showing up, and here we are.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, and for the compliment. Yeah.
So you, before we get into anything about being a dominatrix, which, by the way, I'm sure you've had to answer a million questions about. So I've tried, I'm not afraid of the subject, but I've tried to figure something out to talk to you about that's not so centered around it, because I'm pretty sure you've done it all the time. Like, that's all you talk about. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about the occult side of things as well, because that's fascinating to me. You have a financial witchcraft style about you, and I wanted to ask you really quickly, what do you call money magic? What is it for you?
That's a good question. Well, money magic, I would say, mostly consists out of first the unlayering of the mundane mind and the blockages and reprogramming of it, and then very, very simply, create an abundance of, and I hate that word, right? Been buzzed over, but until we have better language. Yeah. Mostly easy flow of resources. When I speak of money, I mostly refer to currency in its broadest form, and it usually translates to resources in general, rather than just money as a dollar or digital currency itself.
Right. I completely understand. A twofold I understand, actually. The first part, I really appreciate that you you start off this way and you say, it's a reshifting of your mind first, and then you have to go about these steps, whatever those steps will be, because that's totally how I feel about it too. And I got into radical undoing, that whole thing, in the 90s. I got into that, and I really got deep into the whole Reikian thing, and changing your, the whole psychosomatic thing, and changing your brain and things like that. So I dig that a lot. And I think that things can't happen until you do that. So that's awesome. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, do you have a specific method, ritualistically, I guess you could say, ceremonially or whatever?
So let me kind of slowly introduce first how I do my magic. I approach very almost academically. I don't call rituals. I call them experiments. I do them very static, right? I do something and keep noting all the synchronicities, events that happen after, anything that might be related to it. Then do the experiment over again, fine tune, and we go from there. They call me the demon whisperer, alleged demon queen. I like to work with demons, combined with the industry that I'm in. it's extremely, doing it so long, it's extremely easy and beneficial. And I like to work with like my blood offerings, so like blood magic, probably, to put, if we need to put an umbrella term over it.
That is so aesthetically pretty. That's a very aesthetically pretty path. I, when I was younger, a lot younger, like as a teenager and as a kid, my mom was a really weird chick, and like she, at some point, got into the occult and then got into magic, and she stopped working and she just started like, this is how it happened. So sometimes there was failures when that happened, but then she got better at it. And it was weird as a kid, like my mom she would get people to do shit for her all the time, and like that's how she just work people, and like that's so I watched her do that and learn like how that whole game worked. And that I completely understand, because I, at that time, I went into like the Goetia, and I stuck into the whole Abramelin and Goetia category, I guess you could say. But I understand what it's like to like live off of it. Like you have to like, this is what you do. Really, this is how you're making money. Like, yeah, you make money other ways, but like this is really your job.
Yeah.
Like this is how you know what I mean? Like if you stop doing that, like maybe it wouldn't be as easy then,
Yeah.
Like, so I totally dig that.
So let me ask you, because you use your mom as a great example, right? So would you call your mom a witch or an occultist?
I think if it was personal, I would say a witch.
Yeah.
I would say that. If talking
would
personal.
she identify as one?
I think, yeah, she would identify as a witch. She wouldn't. I don't think she would identify with Wicca per se,
Okay.
but she would identify with the word. Yeah.
Mm. Like for me, it's interesting nowadays to observe that, because the occult, right, got hit mainstream first of all,
Right.
and it got like all this like buzz around it, that we call everyone who has any charisma, marketing tactics or whatever, we're like, oh, that's such a magical person. I'm like, right. No.
It's true.
Yeah. She's
true.
totally a witch. I'm like, no, she's really just good at marketing. Like, if we're going to call that magic now too, like, I guess, but hey.
Yeah, I think marketing has become a strange, it's taken a strange place in modern life, I think too. It's I don't know what's going on with it. I really read a lot of Marshall McLuhan, who saw like media being the thing that actually influences the message before the message comes out. So like if it's on a radio or if it's a newspaper, that medium is what is going to influence it first. And I think on the internet, where advertising is king, like that's, if you want to make money, if you're like if you're a search engine or something like that, that's how you do it. You do it on advertisements. And so I think like it takes over,
Yeah.
And it's
just to touch quickly on the marketing thing. Like, I feel back in the day, I don't know what age you are, but whatever, still back in the day, it was like, the evil marketers and the sales people, right? Like it was us versus them. And now, with the upcoming, like, self-help and everything, you can learn everything. People realize like, whoa, everything is marketing, and get like into everything becomes groups, like you have NLP and you have cold sales and everything's like intertwined in hypnosis and everything. And it's just like, wow.
No, it's an apt observation. It's it's surreal. It really is, because it's true. I think this, because I have seen that with from my own observations as well. I think it comes from irony becoming like so common that it became a tool of commercials after a while. Like they started using that, and that was like, amongst your friends, if you're like hip and cool, like you use irony and shit, but then they started doing it and it changed the whole game, It was like fire or something, they got it.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
So now I got to see you on, were you on Dutch television? Like I thought, like I saw you on there. That's freaking cool. So, do people like, I always wondered this, like, do like they come after you? Like, do they just like, hey, you, like, I feel you. That's,
Yeah.
I feel
So
honored though.
yeah. So this is the thing. I've been a dominatrix. Let me say on and off for 12 years ish. Back when I started, like there was no online scene. That wasn't a thing, right? Like it
Right.
was all real life, real parties, real events. Then I took a pause from the scene for a while, and like for 3 years. And after came back, it was, it reached its peak of online. So it was like the whole world transmuted. So back in the day, I was like in all these magazines. I have boxes full, and I was like in these newspapers, and now I'm like on YouTube channels and online everywhere. So
Right.
yes, and I walk, I like in my daily life, I have, my hat on and my sunglasses, and so people.
Yeah, I've watched, and it's weird. This is why it's surreal for me. I've watched a like the online world has started to finally take a hold of like the sex work industry and do something with it. You know what I mean? And that's, yeah, the internet has always, been intertwined with it, but it's taking an organization now, and it's really interesting to see. It seems like it would have happened so much longer ago than now. And I was wondering why it took so long, because you think that that would have been one of the first things to really take shape online.
Yeah. So I would say, as someone from like within the community, right? I would say it had always been. I think internet is built on porn and internet,
Right.
like mainly, and everything kind of like, started from there, and army things. But I feel like the difference in the shift comes from where it was male and corporation owned,
Right.
and now everyone is like, individual entrepreneur, and the corporations need different platforms than individuals do. So I feel that it has taken more shape and more clear shape, because everyone has, we're like, we don't need no middleman. We can do this by ourselves. Like, why are we paying all these, and the banks these crazy fees and these middlemen? So no, we're not doing that anymore.
Right. Yeah. What is up with that? What is up with the bank inconveniences with that kind of shit? It's really weird, because we're told, like, we're sold a story that like financial institutions are amoral, or and they don't judge, they don't think like that. But then, you know it's not so much like that. It's so strange. They say I still have a hang up with that. But
Yeah, and so now, so without going into like, wild stories and kind of like going to wild corners, but you see that people are being like marginalized right now, and it's affecting sex workers, it's affecting occult, platforms, because occultists, commercial occultists are being booted everywhere, just like sex workers were. And like, so there's a whole, we call it the war on freedom, because you represent something that isn't beneficial for, dogmatic thinking. um yeah.
yeah, I mean, I watched post 9/11 turn into this strange direction that it didn't feel like it was supposed to go in that direction in the first place. It felt supposed to go more and towards exactly what we're talking about, which is these indie industries taking over and redefining what they are, and letting the actual members of those communities define what they are, and loosening these chains of these financial institutions and things like that. But I watched a weird moral movement happen. You can say it's Christian, but it's like a very specific brand of it, though, that it's coming from. You know what I mean? It's this evangelical American kind of like crazy cuckoo stuff. And my mom became one of those people before she became like what she eventually became. And so I got to see that stuff firsthand. And my wife was grew up in Tennessee with like a family, and like that did that whole thing too. It's insane. It really is. and it's worse to think that the world is starting to like move in this direction. Like, no, 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 no. It's not supposed to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Really
it's like, we've talked publicly about it with a fellow witch, Astrid, right? Like everyone has this feeling that like when we speak of, fascism, censorship and all of that, that it kind of like, everyone thinks like that things happen, that it just happens overnight and one day, like, but that's not how it works though, right? Like
right.
it happens so smoothly, and it usually affects, smaller groups or specific targeted groups, and then before you know it, like it slithers into the mainstream and you're like, but how did where did this come from? And like it's too late by then, right?
Digress though, but
Like, and no one wants to take accountability, right? Because that's
true.
I always perceive the modern West, right? So it's not only America, but I'm talking about the Netherlands, UK, France. It's
Right.
again, I refer to that as the modern West. Like it operates as a corporation, and from a corporation perspective, marketing on fleek,
Right.
right? Because no one is accountable. Everyone's holier than thou, and everyone wants someone else to fix things. Again, like I'm a policeman, cool, but I'm the good cop. Like I'm not
Right.
part of it,
Yeah.
right? So yeah,
No, I understand. And it's the celebration of those exceptions. You know what I mean? Where everyone gets together and says, "Hey, look at this one guy. He's not like the other ones." It's like, well, that's good for him. That's awesome. But what
yes,
about
we're
the
not
other ones?
celebrating the yeah.
Yeah, it is crazy. Especially like the COVID world, like the whole post pandemic now. So how's that influenced your job? How has that done it?
So little introduction. When COVID broke loose, I was stuck in the US, right?
Oh,
So I like all my people in Europe, they were like having toilet paper problems. Meanwhile, in the US, everyone was having gun problems, and I was just like, I don't want to have gun problems. I want to have toilet paper problems too. Literally, right? Thank God, one of my main witches, she let me stay, and I kept booking tickets, and they kept being canceled. And like 1 month later, I finally was back in Europe. Um, so I took like a whole. I think I took off 2 months. I just didn't show up online, nothing. But for most sex workers who already had some platform, um, you know, this is the thing, right? The hornies are stuck at home.
right.
So there's no normally horny people have like they have a daily routine. They go to the job. They have to do this. Now they're just stuck with their desires at home. That's when I come in. That's when robbing becomes quite easily, and it just becomes fluent, and it just goes.
Yeah, I mean
So
that's what I thought. I thought it would have been like that. It would have been a big
yeah,
boost. And yeah,
yeah.
I can imagine. So this is one aspect that has always fascinated me. Would it be fair to say you specialize in blackmail, or was it just something that you do?
Yes.
Okay.
So I would say I say I'm a dominatrix who specializes in extreme psychological fetishes, such as financial domination, blackmail, and extreme humiliation. Blackmail by far one of my favorites.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So, by the way, it's a very cool thing to say. You can, if you can actually hang a shingle that says that, that's awesome. You say, "I specialize in blackmail." That's,
And it's
but
so funny, like for people who like, because people are starting to be aware of what is dominatrix, right? You have leather on and you whip people, right? Like that's the old
right,
version of it. And then we go like extreme psychological, like what does that mean? And I'm like, well, yeah, I specialize in blackmail. And they're like, I don't know what that means. And I'm like, basically, some people who don't have too much mental freedom and they feel like they need a mental container. I create that container, and I kind of like push the corners and boundaries a little bit, and then a little bit further.
what would you think? Okay, so when it comes to the financial domination, or not domination, the blackmail, what would you say is your average, um I wouldn't say average client. What I mean is that, like, what is their average level of what they can take of that? What would you think?
Yeah. So I would say if you refer to blackmail clients, I'm just going to refer to them that way. You kind of have like two real differences. The ones that are in for long term, and by long term I mean month or months, which is a much more sophisticated game, right? Because you
Right.
want to have people on the edge constantly, but not push them over the edge because then you lose the game,
Right.
right? Um, or you have short-term people who kind of just who would probably just like more the blackmail fantasy, right? Like being exposed somewhere or something. But they never. That's yeah. That's a much more short-term game. So I would say that's the main difference. Um, as for first of all, blackmail is I wouldn't say a rich people game. It could be, but it's a well-off people game, right?
Right.
Like me blackmailing you if you make 2K a month, like that. What we doing here, right? That makes no sense.
It's true.
Um, so there's a specific class to it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of person who would make like, let's say, like minimum wage or whatever? What kind of person would even like think about that? Like, you know what I really need?
Like,
I really need.
I feel so entrapped by capitalism and patriarchy. Let me give money to another woman, my hard-earned money, because life doesn't suck enough yet. Like, no one does that.
No. So I completely understand. So okay, you do. Is it legal to still do on-site stuff, or do you have to do only online? I feel.
No, well, you can do both, but like this whole fetish, it's one of the fetishes that people mostly latch on when they hear it, like right, and like I have crazy stories. I have crazy stories of judges. I have lawyers. I have CEOs, and like again, crazy stories. I would not be able to mention all of it,
Right.
but so people think, oh, so they have this simplified idea that, oh, like some person just sends you this embarrassing picture and you just kind of like blackmail them, like, hey, if you don't pay me, then I'm gonna expose you. Like, obviously it's not that simple.
Right.
um it's not, again, this is gray area. I work with real contracts that I have set up by a professional, but in the end of the day, again, it's blackmail is illegal regardless,
Right.
right? So again, you want to keep it under that edge nonstop, because if I take it over it, we're in like illegal ground, which,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Somebody might take it and go whine to the police. How
Yeah.
ironic.
If, right? So have you seen the movie Hustlers with Jennifer
Yes.
Lopez?
Hmm?
Okay, so like what they like, it's one of these things, right? Like they would drug these people and let them do these crazy embarrassing things in a strip club. No one dares to really go to the cops like, yo, I let myself be drugged by some crazy bitches and now I'm poor. Like, no one takes you seriously. So again, it's like it's that area. We're playing in that area.
Right. I love that because for me, like life happens in those gray areas. You know what I mean? Like I love that. I love anything like that. It doesn't matter what it's about. If it's in those weird little places where it's like, there's no instructions here. There's no, there's no.
I make the game.
Yeah. I mean, those things, it fascinates me the most. There's not enough attention on stuff like that. And I understand if
Yes.
there was attention on it, then maybe it wouldn't be there anymore. But like a gentrification, but
Yeah, that would become the problem, right? Because if it touches on like bigger crowds, people would want some regulation, which
right.
is that takes away the whole fun
Then you'd
out of
have
it.
like a whole you'd have like a cat house type situation where you know what I mean? And like, yeah, it would be totally talk about marketing. Like the marketing would just be like off the chain. They'd be insane. There would be a movie eventually about somebody who does that and saves the world or some shit like that. And
Yeah,
yeah, it would be pretty bad. God, that's what's happening everywhere now though. Everything gets gentrified into
it is
oblivion.
right. And even like to stay among this topic, like I have several financial slaves, as they are called, right?
Mhm.
And one of them is on this financial slave diet, right? So I have his whole bank account. He gets weekly cash
Oh,
that he can
okay.
spend. But like I was thinking, like I want more money from you, so I'm gonna put you on like financial diet. So, and I uploaded this picture on Facebook too, where I was like, you don't get to eat meat anymore. You're on noodles and rice, and you get to draw a chicken on a paper and put it next to it. And that's what we're doing now. Because that way more money goes to me. But if you regulate stuff like that, people
Right.
will be like, this person needs food. And I'm like, says who? He still has a little fatties. He's good. Don't
Yeah, I
worry.
mean, you die from dehydration before you die of starvation. So it's
Exactly.
yeah, I that's awesome. That's great. Um, okay, so here's something I've always wanted to know was how exactly did this happen for you? Like how did you seek it out? Did it seek you out, or was it one of those synchronicity things? Or
Yeah, so my mom was, I would call my mom the end boss of all prostitutes.
I
Like
feel
um she would haul in ten thousands of m- monies, different currencies per weekend or something, just by having one client. She was a master manipulator. When I was young and we would go out with one of her clients, like I know in hindsight, perhaps it's not the most like healthy environment for a kid to grow up in, but like this is
right.
what it is. This is what it
Yeah.
is, right? So she was like, if you say these nice things to these men, maybe he will buy you will buy you stuff, right? And we would go to the zoo, and I'd be like, hey, and I would get like my, my animals or whatever. I would get stuff. So it would start like that, and um, I do have to say, being brought up in East Europe, and East Europe mentality is much more different than in the West. Like
Oh,
we are
absolutely.
kind of being molded to find yourself a man, and how do you manipulate men, right? Like how do you make yourself so valuable by like hiding all, like I'm sorry, East Europe, I'm gonna spill the biggest secret right now. Like you will hide all his stuff so he can't find anything without your help. Like in the West, people would be like, Jesus fuck, are you incapable? Like, where did you put it? In East Europe, you hide the things so he needs you. Right? Like these are like these subtle differences. So yeah, before rambling all about this, so being brought up by her, getting in touch with um the wild side of life fetish scene. Wait, I'm gonna pause this. So back when I was younger, my caregivers would be called in school, and they would be like, your daughter is having these deals with boys, and they would be like, well, what's the deal? Well, you tell them. And I would be like, well, the deal is, if I get to kick them in the nuts, then they get to do my homework. And like they would consent to that, right? So so everyone's like, well, they consent, like what do you want us to do to not like, so I already had like this weird manipulation sadistic side in me. And as I grew and teenage years, I found the fetish parties and got into training. And again, back then there was much more demand for it. I had a certain look. I was the young generation. I learned quickly. I dove in full head on. So that's how it kind of started.
Well, I I feel somewhat kindred to your upbringing. So I understand I understand it. I do. In that sense. I do understand it. Now, as far as like the East European part of it, like my grandma was Slavic, so like I understand a little bit about that too. Like that, and yeah, I think in East European culture, it's like if you can't figure a way to like take care of yourself, then go fuck yourself. Like that's how that culture is. It doesn't matter where you go in that part of Europe. That's how everybody thinks. They're just like, look, there's something you can do something. If you can't do anything though, like I got nothing for you. And that's something the West is very different. Very different.
Yeah, and in the East, it's very publicly also discussed that aesthetic is a currency, right?
Right.
Here it's kind of like, oh no, we have this dogmatic lie, like no, we want someone with substance and smart. Yeah, sure, but also no.
Yeah, I growing up, my mom became very adept at using men to get whatever she needed, and to a high level. It wasn't for a while until she I guess let her heart take over, and she fell in love with someone, and then that's when the bad times started in her life.
Such a beautiful story this was. Yeah.
But before that, yeah, I completely understand. I absolutely do. And yeah, you learned a financial lesson very early on in life, which is people are willing to pay for anything. You just got to find them. You just got to connect with them, network, and
But this is the thing, right? Like if we speak of like fetishes and this whole scene where everything is a possible commodity, that's a Western thing. Like when
Right.
I go back home and I have to like attempt to explain what I do, they're like, but the communists just took all of our money. Like, what do you mean they give it to you? Like, it makes no sense. I'm like,
It's true.
yeah, uncle, that's because the West has too much freedom and no mental containers, so I create those. And he's like, but why though? Like, completely goes over everyone's head.
Yeah, it's such a strange streak in Western Europe and then in America of this. I guess was it Protestantism? And maybe that's what it is. The whole like work is holy work, and you know what I mean. And then it creates this weird inner pressure because of the strictness and this, and it's strange. It's strange. And then you mix with it, like once you had that pressure cooker, you throw America into it, which is like, and you get to do what the fuck you want to do when you want to do it. Woo! And then it turns into like a tornado. You know, it's strange, and it's taken over, and it's you can't put that genie back in the bottle once it's out. When people are like, what do you mean? You can tell me that I can't do it? Fuck you. People get crazy. And so and I think that's where we are right now. We're like, you know what I mean? We're like, it's like we need to get back into yin. We're way too yang. And like people are like, no. I'm hanging out in yang. That's okay. We're doing that. And then I think that's what's going on. It's so weird.
Yeah, so regarding that, I feel like again, from a marketing perspective, they did a great job on rebranding the term freedom, right?
Right.
Because like no one is free, but we have this and this thing, if no one's free, no one will revolt, which is the best tactic.
Right. No, absolutely. It stinks of the CIA. it stinks of some, of some Cold War intelligence agency. I mean, it does. And it's true and it's the same script here, at least in this country. It is, well, you are free. You can say what you want and you can do what you want. And it's like, well, really, no, I can't. And nor should I. So it's okay. Yeah. But it's the same script every time. You can say what you want. You can do what you want. You can get out there and get a job and become a millionaire. And I'm like,
yeah.
I mean, if you have a hustle, you can, but not one of these like capitalist jobs where you have to like put your time in and shit. Like, hell no. No.
Work hard, 70 hours a week, and you'll get rich. Okay, I guess that's a lie.
It's absolutely the truth.
Such a lie.
But it's a lie. Yeah.
This thing, right? Like, sure, you can say and do anything, but people confuse the right to freedom with like the lack of consequences. Like, that's not it though. Like,
right.
You sure you can say and do whatever you want, but they don't have consequences.
Yeah, exactly.
That in the freedom package.
I think the original idea was supposed to be that people should be able to move from classes smoother than they used to be able to. And that was the idea. But then it just got bastardized into, well, people should just have the liberty to do what the fuck they please. And it's like, what does that even mean? But yeah. And see, here's my idea though. See, I think where you find the craziness in this country, you find hidden classism, and that's the whole
Oh,
idea.
wait, you froze up on me again. One sec.
Okay.
Are we back? Yes, we're back.
Okay. I think classism is the real evil here. You cannot talk about it here.
Absolutely. People are not ready for that conversation. Absolutely. No. Absolutely. Once you understand systems, you will see that classism is the root problem of everything, and it will not be fixed.
Absolutely. You can't talk about it. You're not even allowed to mention it. You know,
nope.
That's
People
the thing.
I'm not ready for that conversation.
I say that about, the ironic people, like the not black people who do it, but like ironic white people who like quote Martin Luther King and shit like that. And I'm always like, when I hear that, I'm always like, you realize that like it wasn't until he started talking about classism that someone killed him, right? They didn't like him and they went after him, but they didn't kill him until he started talking about classism. And he was like, hey, we're going to march and we're going to fight this poverty thing and you're going to give us a basic income. Then they're like, oh, okay.
Now you're taking it too far, sir. Calm down.
Every time somebody starts talking about classism, that's when the bullet goes into their brain. Like that's when people kill people.
People are not ready for that conversation.
No. It's true. Absolutely truth. I see that in everything. And I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. The problem is there's an inherent classism going on. You're not allowed to know about it. And like,
yeah. But this is like, and like we call these Daniel Delsky calls these the unanswerable questions, right? Because how do you acknowledge the root of a problem if you're not able to acknowledge the upper layers topping them, which you cannot. Again, marketing on point. Just crumble that system so much that it's so intertwined, and there's not one solution. There's not two. There's no solution just for one because they're all connected.
Absolutely.
This became such a sad conversation.
It becomes, especially here, I want to say America and maybe Western Europe, as far as like the UK, not the other ones like France or Germany, but American UK, they are doing this crazy thing now where it's this ultra left and ultra right. It's not really this though. This is not what's really going on, but that's like that's the show. It's like, well, it's extreme left and extreme right are fighting and then they blah 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 blah. The problem is that like it's caused a catch-22 because you're not allowed to talk about anything that criticizes capitalism now, like at all. And that means it's extreme left. It doesn't matter what you do. If you are critical of it, you're extreme left. And if you, man, I don't even know, it's not an equilibrium. I can't say, and if you do this, you're called extreme right. No, it's mostly assholes. Mostly. I've heard some intelligent people from what you would consider right spectrum or whatever. And as long as they're not talking about social issues, they make some sense until they start talking about social issues.
This thing, they created this illusion of just two sides, and we are at a point in history where two sides are completely batshit crazy. Like they both lie, they both are rooted in used terms. They have no understanding of or meaning of right. Like all the solutions become these hip Twitter phrases,
right?
These absolutes. But the world isn't a Twitter phrase. It's complex. It's rooted in many other things, and people don't have the answer for that because they just sound hip with their Twitter phrase.
Absolutely, and this is happening for good or bad for anything. You could be like a radical terrorist group, and like this is how you do your radical terrorism now. It's really weird because like everyone does it now like this. This is how you do it. It's got to be blurbed out and really hip and catchy. And it's strange. I heard, oh God, I think it was David Foster Wallace, the author, and he talked about like commercials becoming, what I was talking about earlier, like commercials becoming ironic and really tapping into the vein of like that kind of culture, that hip culture. And it was him that was questioning, like, what's the end game? I mean, he killed himself in 2008, so he never got to see it, but it's like he was saying, what is the end game? What's going to happen when you don't know anymore what is irony and what isn't irony anymore, because it's, you live in this weird hyper world of irony because it's been
Yeah,
used by the monetary system.
absolutely, absolutely.
um, so,
So what is the end game?
hmm, I don't know. I don't know. I guess, for me, I think we are so far away from the end game to even know what the end game is yet. I think we are in the middle of a weird um, intelligence war between a lot of people. I don't think it's between. I don't think it's the old days. It's not. It's not America versus Russia. And this is what the way it is. No, it's like there's so many players on the table now. This is chaos. This is what this is, and that's what I think.
Fully agree. Fully agree.
As of right now, the there's Chinese agencies that want to help the elections in this country go one way, and then there's Russian ones that want it to go the other way, and then there's other ones that could be working like mercenaries for any of them. So it's like insane. It's really crazy. So I don't know. The end game right now is you better find out where you lie and figure out how to make your living off of it, pretty much.
Yeah.
I've because I never had like a per se skill. I mean, I worked with chefs. I didn't go to school to be a chef, so I don't want to call myself a chef. It's like a respect thing. But I was a sous chef actually, and I worked for a while in it. But this is the only real skill that I have. Like that's a job skill. The past everything else is like I was a tarot reader, a musician, and shit
Mm-hmm.
like that. And it felt like to me every time shit went to shit, those were the skills that I didn't ever have to struggle that hard because I had those skills instead
Yeah.
of like a job skill. I had the hustle skill, and therefore like I never got to really feel the flood like like other people did. So for me, I always think like that. I'm always like,
Yeah.
well,
Absolutely.
where's your raft?
What I speak about when I even refer mostly to money magic, right? Because people want to hear the secret ingredient,
Right.
and um, the secret ingredient, whether it's in occultism or hustle and capitalism, it's not. It's like if you want to make money for sure, you'll become a lawyer, you'll become a surgeon, right? Like
Right.
that could be it. If you don't want to do these things, then it doesn't matter what you do because there's money in every industry. So
Absolutely.
it's not about the skill, it's about to create the mental muscle to be able to thrive in any industry, right? But people want to hear
Absolutely.
the secret.
No, no, they don't. And, well, the other thing, and I think that's true. They don't want to hear it. I think the other thing is there's a whole class of people out there that are like, you can't do that. And let me tell you why. Because blah 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 blah. That's very seductive to most people. That's how, in my experience, why most people fail at stuff is like they listen. I think I might have gone frozen. You've gone frozen, so I'll give it a second.
Oh, I can hear you perfectly
Oh, okay.
and see you. Are we
Okay, cool. It just went frozen for like a second. Now everything's back.
okay?
Um, but yeah, it's uh, I, those freezes kill my train of thought every time. Oh, you've gone frozen again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can
Ah,
perfectly hear
okay,
you.
cool. So anyways, so post COVID, your business has boomed a lot more because of people staying in. Where do you think you're
Yeah,
going to
yes.
where do you think you're going to do this in this, how do I rephrase this question? Do you think the laws are going to get better where you are, or are they going to get
No,
worse? You think they're going to get,
everything is going to get worse because it already started.
yeah.
Um, Especially like when we specifically refer to my work, right? A
Mhm.
few years ago, we had the American bill passed, SESTA and FOSTA. It passed as a child trafficking law, human trafficking law, but it shut down Don't pin me down on the exact numbers, but it basically shut down 80% of the online sex industry in the US.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, yeah. There were Craigslist and yeah, all that had to go. Like all of it. Yeah, yeah,
Backpage, right? So, which made it, because what happens if your job becomes illegal? Like, you don't cease to do your job. It just becomes much more dangerous,
right.
problematic, scary. So it started with that, followed by dozens of banks kind of like, latching onto that bill. So for me, it's like, for us, for not for me only, but for us sex workers, impossible to, utilize a normal bank. We have like, we can only go to two or three, four are ridiculous. But there's no other alternative, right? So
Right.
and that's happening here in Europe now too since last year. So it's going to become only worse in that sense. We won't cease existing or operating though. We will just find new ways because we are innovative like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought about that. I thought about wondering about virtual reality and when that's going to become a major player in, evading all that. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that bill. That was a fucked up bill because they were saying that if someone does get victimized using your services, you're legally liable for it, and no company in the world's going to sign on that. Like no one is.
Yeah, but this is the thing, right? Like that makes, in a sense, if you use a bar as an example,
Right.
right? Like the guy behind the bar, if he gives out too much drinks and let willingly a person drive home, he's like he will gonna get sued, or like there's a whole like thing about that, right? So we understand the thought process. However, what happened now is that shutting down a whole industry means that by default everything is going to go underground. So
Right.
any leads, any visibility you had on so-called human trafficking, you just wipe them out right now.
Yeah, and it's the same story every time with those kinds of bills. It's the same story. They just drive things underground, and not just those bills. It tends to be anything that has to do with female reproductive or sexual work. It always has something to do with that. It's like this the same thing, this cat and mouse. You know what I
You
mean?
just stole my heart. You can never do wrong in my eyes anymore from now on. You
But
understand. I feel
it's true.
seen.
The whole abortion thing is the exact same argument. It's they try to do things and it's like, well, this is just going to drive it other elsewhere. I think there's a logical mistake that some people make of thinking that everybody is thinking that rationality is following the law and then everyone is rational and then making those two assumptions. That's absolutely untrue.
Mhm. Mhm.
Untrue. And that's where I think a lot of the problems come in, especially in this country, even economically. We make these assumptions like, well, everyone makes rational decisions, and rational means that you follow these guidelines and these rules. Blah, blah, blah. Like, people don't follow rules, first of all. Like, let's stop that. Like, let's
So people are
let's
not
end that now.
rational at all.
No, and they're not rational because they have
Like,
feelings. Like that's
too much.
yeah, it's true.
They're all over the place.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's but we have to live in this world where we have laws and everything that assume that they are, and that's just insane. That's where you always get these cracks and people falling through them and shit. It never fails.
Yeah.
I have had an amazing conversation with you, and I would love to have another one with you very soon. I'm having these cut up in seasons, so this is season 2, and I have a few musicians lined up, and then I have this pet project I'm doing. I'm doing a documentary on Dr. Christopher S. Hyatt from New Falcon Publications way back in the day. And by the way, it's been a very strange journey doing this. No one wants to talk. No one wants to talk at all. Like, everyone's very cagey, and I've gotten a couple of people, but I do have one of his personal students who I'm going to have a podcast with on the 22nd, and that's going to be really cool. So when that happens, after I get somewhere with that, I'll probably start the 3rd season, and on there, you are definitely invited to come back at that time.
I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Well, that is awesome. I had a great conversation with you, and let me see. Where's my